So here's how this works. If you missed a number, like if you missed number 1, you're going to start right here. If your first one you missed was number 5, then you can fast forward the video until you get to number 5. We're going to go through each problem. We're going to talk about the rules, what you should have known. We're going to do some practice problems, and then you're going to do some practice problems on your own. So if I say write this down, you need to write this down, okay? All right, so if you missed number 1, you should be listening to this right now. You need to pause it, and you need to write everything on this slide down. All right, hopefully you have it all written down, so let's go through it. Whole numbers start at 0, and they're all positives. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's going to be no decimals, okay? Integers are the same, except they're also the negatives. So -1, -2, -3, also the positives, 1, 2, and 3, okay? Integers are negative and positive, but again, no decimals. Rational is where most of our numbers fit in. So if it's a whole or an integer, then it's going to be rational. Fractions are rational. Decimals that repeat are rational. Decimals that end are rational. Irrational is pi. If you ever see pi, that is irrational. Also, decimals that do not end or repeat, that is rational. So let's go through some examples, and you need to write these down as I write them down. So if I gave you the number -5, -5, it is a negative, which means it's not whole, but it is an integer. And if it's an integer, then it is also rational. You need to have that written down. If you don't, you will not get credit for it. I'm going to make you come back and do it again. If you have the number 2/3, that is a fraction. Fractions right here, fractions are rational. That's the only thing it would be. Again, you need to be writing this down with me. So the 2/3, that fraction is rational. If I gave you the square root of 16, well, square roots, we got to type in that calculator. So to type in square roots, you would press second square root, and you type in 16, and you get 4. So the square root of 16 is really 4. 4 would be a whole number, and it would be an integer, and it would be rational. Okay, let's try the square root of 27. Again, we got to do it in our calculator. Square root of 27. Oh, it's a long decimal that does not end or repeat. So the square root of 27 is irrational. What about -2 pi? -2 pi. Well, if you ever see pi, it is irrational. What about the number 0? 0 is a whole number. If it's whole, it's also an integer, and it's also rational. How about -2.6? Well, it's a decimal, so it cannot be whole or integer, because those are not decimals. So this one is just going to be rational, because it ends. If it's a decimal that ends, that means it is rational. Okay? So, if you missed number 1, you need to write down these 10 problems and classify them as whole, integer, rational, or irrational. You need to write all that apply. So you need to do these 10 problems and then go to the next problem that you missed. Just kidding, not yet. You should also write down what you think the correct answer should have been for number 1 and why you think you missed it, okay? Now, if you missed number 2, this is where you should start listening to the video. If you missed number 2, I want you to pause it and write down everything that's on this screen. All right, hopefully you have everything written down. So let's go through this. Functions mean that the x's cannot repeat. Again, function means the x's cannot repeat. So let's go through these. This first one, again, you need to have this written down. Let's circle all of our x's. Our x's are 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Did any of those repeat? 2, 3, 4, 5. No. If they do not repeat, it is a function. So this one, yes, it is a function. Let's do the same thing for this one. This one we're going to underline all of our x's. So I got -1, 0, 1, negative 1. Did any of those repeat? Negative 1, 0, 1, negative 1. Yes, the negative 1 repeated. So this one is not a function because the negative 1 repeated. All right, let's look at the tables. Tables always go x's and y's. So in tables, again, functions, all we care about are the x's. So I'm just going to look at these x's. Negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Did any of those repeat? No, they did not. If they do not repeat, it is a function. Again, here, tables go x's and y's. So I just care about these x's. 3, 4, 5, 4, 10. Did they repeat? Yes, right here, the 4s. There's 2 4s. So this one is not a function because those 4s repeated. Okay, mappings. Mappings mean, again, they always go x's and y's. So each number over here can only have one line. So this has one line, this has one line, this has one line, this has one line. So this one is a function. We don't care about the y's. We don't care about where the lines go to. All we care about is that each number just has one line coming out of it. So let's look at this one. Here's my x's and my y's. So the 3 has one line, the 1 has one line, but the 0 has 2 lines. So this one is not a function because of that 0. Again, everything I have written down on this screen, you need to have written down. So all of these that I've labeled, x's and y's, you need to have this written down. You should be doing these with me. For the graphs, you should do something called a vertical line test. And what that means is when you draw a straight line up and down, it can only touch once. It can only go through the graph once. So right here, this vertical line that they drew, it only touches the graph once right here. So this one is a function. This one, when they drew their vertical line, it touched once here, and it touched once here. So this one is not a function. Here, drew a straight line. It touched once here and once here. So this one is not a function. That's the vertical line test. So, if you missed number 2, you need to write down these following 8 problems, write them down, and you need to classify them as a function or not a function. So just like I did these, you need to write down the problem and then write function. Write down the problem, write not a function if it's not a function. Okay, so you need to do these 8 problems, and then you need to write down what you think the correct answer should have been on the test and why you think you missed it. Okay? If you missed number 3, you should be watching this part of the video. Again, if you missed number 3, you should be watching this part of the video. You need to pause it and you need to write everything down on this screen on your paper. All right, hopefully you have it all written down. Let's go through this. M means the bigger M is your slope, remember. So the bigger your slope is, the steeper the line. The smaller the slope is, the less steep the line. So if I said, let me do white. If I said, and write this example down, this would be a good example. If you have 2x plus 3, and if you have y equals 1/2 x plus 3. And I said, which one's steeper and which one is less steep? Well, the bigger it is, the steeper it is. So which one's bigger, 2 or 1/2? 2 is bigger, so you would put this one is steeper, and this one is less steep. Okay, so that's what M does. Remember, slope's beside the x, so we care about that. B, the number at the end, shifts it up or down. And if it's a plus, it's going to shift it up. If it's a minus, it's going to shift it down. So again, let's write down this example. If I have x plus 2, and I have x minus 2. This one is going to be shifted up because it's a plus 2. And this one is going to be shifted down because it's a minus 2. And then if you make M negative, so like if this was a negative 1/2, it would reflect it over the y-axis, okay? So if you missed number 3, you need to write down the questions. There's only 4, okay? And you need to write out the answers. And when you write out the answer, I want the whole answer. I don't want A. So like number 1, we would write down the question, how does changing the constant c and y equals x plus c affect the graph? And if you think the answer is A, then you would put the graph shifts upward or downward. Don't just put A. I want what the actual answer is that you think. Okay? So I want you to do these 4 problems if you missed number 3 on that test. And then I also want you to write down what you think the correct answer should have been and why you think you missed it. That's number 3. If you missed number 4, you should be watching this video right now. If you missed number 4, you should be watching this video. I want you to pause it, and I want for you to write down the domain and the range. I want you to sketch the graphs. Now, don't spend a lot of time sketching these graphs. Just draw what you think they should be, and we're going to go through them, okay? All right, hopefully you have the notes written down so we can just fill them in now. So what you need to know, domain are your x's, and it goes left to right. Range are your y's, and it goes down to up. So let's do this first graph, domain. Domain goes left. So how far left will this graph go? Well, that arrow means it keeps going. Right. It has that arrow, which means it keeps going. So your domain is going to be all real numbers because it goes left and right forever. Your range goes down to up. Well, it goes down forever. That arrow means it's going to keep going down, 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 down. And up, it's going to keep going up forever. So your range is also all real numbers. I love straight lines because straight lines, linear functions, are always going to be all real numbers for both. Okay? All right, let's do this parabola over here. Your domain. Domain goes left to right. Well, it's going to keep going left, 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 left. And it's going to keep going right, 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 right. So your domain is all real numbers. Your range. Range goes down to up. So it goes down to -6. That's how far down we go. It goes to -6. It touches at -6, so I'm going to put that line under it. Range is y. And then how high up will it go? Well, those arrows mean it keeps going, so it's going to go up to infinity. You should be writing all of this down with me, okay? So if you're behind, pause it and go ahead and catch up, okay? I'm going to give you another way to write the range. Sometimes they'll just write that the y's, if it goes up, it's going to be greater than, and it does touch at -6, so I'm going to put that line, and then they're going to put the -6. So you can write it either way, so I want you to see both. It does start at -6 and it goes up to infinity. But they could also write it like this, and maybe even write, yes, I do want you to write this. If it goes up, it's going to be greater than. If it goes down, then it's going to be less than. Okay, so like this one, when we do this one, it's going to be y is less than because it goes down. Okay, and then remember the line under it just means if it touches at that point, then you'll put the line under it. And if it does not touch at that point, then you won't put the line under it. So let's do this one. Domain, we're going to pretend there are arrows here. So it's going to go left forever, it's going to go right forever. So your domain, again, is all reals. Your range is not. Let's start with how far down it goes. If it goes down forever, it is infinity, but it's actually a negative infinity. So it's down forever. Range is your y, and it goes up to 0, and it does touch at 0. Right here, it touches at 0. So we would put that line under it. Or you could write that y is less than, because it goes down. It does touch, so you should put that equal sign, less than or equal to 0. Okay, what if they give you dots? If they give you dots, then we're not going to use the inequalities. We're going to list out every number. So domain are my x's. So this x is at 1. This x is at 2. This x is at 3. This x is at 4. This x is at 5. And this x is at 6. Again, you should be writing this down with me. Range are your y's. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to go from bottom to top. So this one is at -1. And you need to put them in brackets. This one is at 0. This one is at +1. This one is at 2. This one is at 3. And this one is at 6. Okay? So, if you missed number 4, I want you to answer the following 4 questions, because these are graphs. You don't have to write out the question. You can just write number 1 and whether you think it's A, B, C, or D. Number 2, if you think it's A, B, C, or D. 3 and 4 are here. You actually need to write out the domain and the range on both of them. And then also, if you missed number 4, write down what you think the correct answer should have been and why you missed it. Number 5, if you missed number 5, I need you to write these down. Everything on this page, write it down. If you want to label these as 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't care how you number them, but we're going to go through these examples, okay? So write all of this down. All right, direct is y equals k times x. Inverse is y equals k divided by x. And you need to know that k is the constant of variation, and it's going to be a number. It'll be a number. So let's do these examples. 6 divided by x. If x is in the denominator, that means it's an inverse. This one is an inverse. Inverse. This one says 6x squared. Well, did any of these have exponents? No. So if it has an exponent, it's going to be neither. Also, that I didn't put on here, but you need to know, there's no adding or subtracting either. So like if you have y equals, write this down. Everything I write down, you write down. If you have like 2x plus 6, that's also going to be a neither because it has an adding. So if it ever has an adding or subtracting, it's going to be a neither. Okay? Let's do this one. 25 times x. Well, if it's a number times x, that means it's direct. Again, this one has an exponent, so it's neither. Here, the x is in the denominator. If it's in the denominator, that means it's an inverse. This is has an exponent of a 3. If it has an exponent, it's neither. Negative 7x. If it's multiplying, then that means it's direct. And this has an exponent, so it's going to be neither. Another example I did not put on here that you need to know. Direct variation could also be x divided by a number, like x divided by 4, because we can rewrite this. There's a 1 here. So we could write that as 1/4 x. So then they are actually multiplying. It's just 1/4 times x. So what I want you to take away is that for direct, could also be x divided by k. So k is in the denominator. If there's a number in the denominator and the x is on top, then that means it is direct. Okay? So, if you missed number 5, you need to write down and classify the following 8 questions. Do not put A, B, and C. You can put a D for direct, an I for inverse, or an N for neither. Okay? But write them down. Now, these have other letters besides X's and Y's, but y'all know how this works. This would be just like it's written y equals negative 5x. This would be like writing y equals 9 divided by x. So go through, classify these 8 problems as direct, inverse, or neither. And if you missed number 5, write down what you think the correct answer should have been and why you missed it. If you missed number 6, you need to be watching this part of the video. I want you to pause it and write down everything on this slide. Hopefully you have it written down. So if you have equations, you should put the first half in y1, the second half in y2, and find their intersection. So let's go through these 3 problems. I'm going to type in this first one. I got a 10 parentheses x plus 3 minus parentheses negative 9x minus 4. I see an equal sign, so I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to type in x minus 5 plus 3, and I'm going to graph it. Now, I'm zoomed out. I'm going to zoom back normal so that y'all can see. So the answer is where they cross. To find that, you press second trace, go down to intersection, hit enter, and hit enter 3 more times. So x is negative 2. So for this first answer, x is negative 2. Let's do the next one. We got 12, parentheses. Remember, you can't type a K, so you should just use an X. Let's graph it. Okay, look at those lines. Those lines are parallel. If lines are parallel, that means there is no solution. They will never cross. Let's do this last one. Negative 12, parentheses, x minus 12. See an equal sign, so I'm going to hit enter. And then I got negative 9, 1 plus 7x. I'm going to graph it. All right, I can't see their intersection, so I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to zoom out, zoom 3, and hit enter. All right, let's see if it'll do it. Let's try second trace their intersection, enter, enter, enter. Yep, the x is negative 3. So, if you missed number 6, write down the following 5 problems and solve for the variable. Just to give you a heads up, you will not get any decimals. So if you type it in and you get a decimal, you type something in wrong. So go back and check it. Also, if you missed number 6, write down what you think the correct answer should have been and why you missed it. Number 7, if you missed number 7, you should be on this screen right here taking notes. So pause it, write these notes down, and we'll go over it. All right, parallel means they have the same slope. You need to know that. Perpendicular means it has a negative reciprocal. That means flip it and change the sign. So let's go through an example of that real quick. If I had 3/4 and I said, what's perpendicular? You'd flip it, so it'd become 4/3, and change the sign. So it would go from a positive to a negative. So those are perpendicular slopes. So let's just go through this. Write an equation that's perpendicular. So first, let's figure out perpendicular. Well, slope is always with the x. So here's my slope. It's negative 5. That means I want to flip it and change the sign. So if I have negative 5, you should be writing this down. Well, it's not a fraction, but I can turn it into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath. So if I flipped it, it'd become 1/5, and change the sign. So instead of a negative, it would become a positive. So I'm looking for a slope of 1/5. That means it's not B and it's not D. It's either A or C. And I wanted to go through this point. Well, how do you know if it goes through a point? Hopefully by now you remember, oh look, I'm going to type it in y equals. So let's type in A. A says 1/5 x plus 7. I'm going to do second graph. Second graph. And I want to see if it goes through 10, negative 4. So I'm going to go down to 10. Does it go through at 10, negative 4? It does not. I'm going to type in C just to double check. Please always do this on your EOC. Double check. 1/4 x minus 6. Second graph. Does it go through at 10, negative 4? It sure does. So C is my answer. Let's look at this problem. This one I want parallel. Parallel means the same slope. But look at my problem. Before I can even figure out parallel, what is wrong with this problem? Hopefully you have seen y is not by itself. I got to get y by itself. So you got some options. I'm going to go ahead and move my x. So I'm going to do plus x. We got to be able to solve for y. So I'm going to bring down 1 plus 3y. And over here, 0 plus x is just an x. I'm going to move my 1 by subtracting it. So I got 3y equals x minus 1. I can't combine those. Then to move that 3, I'm going to divide everything by 3. So y equals, there's a 1 here, 1 divided by 3 is 1/3, x minus 1/3. So, again, parallel means the same slope. So I want my slope to be 1/3, which means it is not A and it is not D. So let's type them in and see. Let's start with B. B says 1/3 x minus 3. I'm going to go see if it goes through negative 3, negative 4. And it does. So I found my answer. This one should be B. It goes through -3, -4. So if you missed number 7, there are 5 problems. Here's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5. I want you to write down the problems. So the part I want you to write down, I want you to write down this part. I want you to write down the ordered pair. I want you to write this part and write down the ordered pair. This part, write down the ordered pair. And just look, if it's parallel, remember it means the same slope. So you want this slope to be 2. If it's perpendicular, it means flip it and change the sign. So in this one, here's your slope. You want to flip it and change the sign. So try these. Also, if you missed number 7, don't forget this part down here. Write down what you think the answer should have been and why you missed it. If you missed number 8, you should be right here with me. Number 8, I want you to pause it and write down everything on this slide. All right, hopefully you have written it down. So M is your slope, and the formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It's also rise over run. So I'm going to make this first one ordered pairs. I'm going to make the ordered pairs 9, 2, and 3, -2. And ordered pairs go x and y, and these are going to get 1s, and these are going to get 2s. So y2, I'm going to plug into this formula right here. So I got -2 minus 2. I did y2 minus y1 right there. That's on top. On bottom, x2 is 3 minus x1 is 9. Do your top. -2 minus 2 is -4. On bottom, 3 minus 9 is -6. So from here, you should type that in. You should do -4 divided by -6. We don't want decimals, so we're going to hit math, enter, enter. We're going to get 2/3. So the slope of this first one was 2/3. All right, let's do this one. My ordered pairs are 0, -5. You can use any ordered pair. I just always like to use the first ones. And x, y, and these get 1s, and these get 2s. So y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. So on top I'd get 4, on bottom I'd get 1, and 4 divided by 1 is 4. All right, here, again, you should be writing all of these down. If you're not, pause it and catch back up to me. So here my order pairs are 0, 10, and 1, 17, x, y, 1s and 2s. Nope, sorry, 1s and 1s. Woo. 2s and 2s. So y2 is 17, y1 is 10, x2 is 1, x1 is 0. 17 minus 10 is 7, 1 minus 0 is 1, 7 divided by 1 is 7. If you missed number 8, write down the following 6 problems. Write down the tables and find the slopes. And also, if you missed number 8, write down what you think the correct answer should have been and why you missed it. If you missed number 9, you should be watching right here. Pause it, write all these notes down, and then we'll go through them. So A, the bigger A is, the skinnier it will be, and the smaller it is, the wider it'll be. C shifts it up or down, and making a negative reflects it across the x-axis. So if I, let me see if I have notes. Yes, I do have notes, good. All right. So again, pause it and write this down. Okay, now you should also write this down. How do these graphs differ? Well, this is a 1, and this is a 1/2. 1/2 is smaller, so this one would be wider, because 1/2 is wider, is smaller, and this one would be narrower. Here, they're both x squareds, so this one has a -3, and this one really has a 0. So this one is shifted down 3, because it has that -3, shifted down 3. Here, again, the only thing that's different is this has a +4. So that means this one is going to shift up 4. So if you missed number 9, I want you to answer these problems. I'm not going to make you write these down because it's a lot. If you'll just put number 1 and what you think the answer would be, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are right here. And also, if you missed number 9, write down what you think the correct answer should have been and why you missed it. Last one, if you missed number 10, I want you to pause it. I want you to write everything on here down, and then we'll go through it. So if they're multiplying, that means you add the exponents. If they're dividing, that means you subtract the exponents. And if there are 2 exponents, then that means multiply them. And to fix a negative exponent, move it. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So let's do these 3 examples. There's lots of exponents. That means we're going to multiply to all 3 of these. So this would be a to the 3 times 3 is 9. B to the 2 times 3 is 6. C to the 0 times 3 is still 0. Anything to the 0 power is 1, so we don't even want this. So our actual final answer, and you need to have this written down, is a to the 9th, b to the 6th. Okay? Let's do the second one. I'm going to put a 1 on this x. Again, if it's on the outside like this, that means you multiply to everything. So this would be x to the 8th and y to the 10th. And on bottom, it'd be x to the 2 and y to the 4th. I multiplied. Now the rule is, if they're dividing, you subtract. So 8 minus 2 is 6, so that would be x to the 6th. 10 minus 4 is also 6, so that would also be y to the 6th. All right, here, this 2, I'm going to put 1s. The 2 gets a 1, the c gets a 1, the c gets a 1, the d gets a 1. So this 2 is going to multiply to all of these. So I'm going to get 2 to the 2nd, c to the 2nd, and d to the 8th. I multiplied, multiplied, multiplied. In this other parentheses, I'm going to get c to the 5 and d to the 5. 2 squared, 2 to the 2nd is 4. And then let's look at our c's. If they're multiplying, the rule is that you add them. So 2 plus 5, that would be c to the 7. And 8 plus 5 would be d to the 13. That's really like the one on the test. Make sure also if it was a negative, you would put it in parentheses. So negative 2 squared, you would do like this in your calculator and you'd still get 4. So if you missed number 10, I want you to answer the following 5 problems. Again, you don't have to write these down. You can just write like number 1 I think is A, or number 2 I think is B, or whatever you think it is. Okay? And, oh, I didn't put it, but yes, I do. If you missed number 10, then I want you to write down what you think the correct answer should have been and why you missed it. When you get done with all of this, if you would bring it up to me and let me check the ones that you missed. So thank you very much.